Everyone wants to be a good person, but what if that's exactly how the system controls you? You're taught to obey, to be agreeable, to never question the rules, because questioning means conflict, and conflict isn't nice. So you silence your instincts, numb your outrage, and follow the crowd, even when the crowd is walking straight into madness. George Orwell didn't just warn us about surveillance or censorship. He warned us about the weaponization of morality, about how the very idea of being good can be twisted into a tool of obedience, guilt, and control. This video isn't about becoming heartless. It's about understanding the hidden forces that hijack your conscience so you can finally live with clarity, not compliance. You were taught to be good, not just in school or church or at home, but in every quiet signal the world sent your way. Be polite, be patient, don't speak out, keep the peace, fit in, and slowly you absorb the message. That goodness is obedience. That goodness is silence. That goodness is submission. But George Orwell saw this message for what it really was, a carefully constructed tool, not a natural truth, not a moral compass, a social weapon. Because in a world where people can no longer think for themselves, the only way to keep them compliant is to redefine goodness so that it always aligns with power. And it starts with fear. In 1984, Orwell describes a world where morality has been turned inside out, where the party defines what is true, what is good, and what must be believed, even when it contradicts reality. The citizens of Oceania are trained not to think, but to double think, to accept two contradictory ideas at once and call it virtue. And here's what's terrifying. Orwell wasn't just describing a dystopia. He was describing a pattern we see everywhere. You're not punished for doing evil. You're punished for refusing to agree. You're punished for being inconvenient, for asking hard questions, for seeing clearly. And so, people stop looking. Not because they're evil, but because they're good. Because they want to be seen as cooperative. Because they've been trained to feel guilty for stepping outside the narrative. It's not just governments. It's in our schools, our corporations, our social media platforms, our relationships. We're living in a culture that praises goodness, but only when it's passive, sterile, and predictable. But real goodness isn't obedience. Real goodness is dangerous. It disrupts, it challenges, it risks. Real goodness refuses to be programmed. Orwell knew that once morality becomes a tool of conformity, people lose their ability to resist evil, not because they agree with it, but because they fear being seen as the wrong kind of person. You've seen it. The silence of people who know something is wrong, but say nothing. The ones who nod and smile and perform their virtue, while something deeper inside them is slowly dying. And what's worse, we start to turn on each other. Orwell showed us that the most effective form of control isn't brute force. It's moral manipulation. It's making people so afraid of being seen as bad that they'll betray their own truth just to belong. They'll turn on their neighbors, they'll censor their thoughts, they'll rewrite their own memories, not because they believe in the system, but because they no longer believe in themselves. And that's the tragedy. Because when your identity depends on approval, you're never really alive. You're just performing, living someone else's idea of what a good person should be. But what if being good isn't about being nice? What if goodness is fire, not submission? What if moral clarity means stepping outside the crowd and standing alone? Because here's the truth. They told you that anger is dangerous, but Orwell believed the real danger is numbness. And what happens when your emotions are no longer your own? There's a sinister trick buried deep in the modern idea of being good. It whispers, if you follow the rules, you're righteous. It promises, if you stay in line, you're safe. But George Orwell understood what happens when this idea is taken to its logical extreme. In a world where power decides what is right, then to be good is to become a servant of that power, no matter how cruel it becomes. In 1984, the most loyal citizens weren't the ones who quietly tolerated the regime. They were the ones who believed in it the most, the ones who loved Big Brother, the ones who had nothing left inside them except slogans, guilt, and obedience. They weren't monsters. They were good people, in the worst possible sense of the word. This is what Orwell called the banality of evil. The terrifying truth that most harm is not committed by sadists or tyrants, but by well-meaning individuals who think they're doing the right thing, not because they're cruel, but because they're afraid of not being good. And so, they carry out policies they don't fully understand. They enforce rules they don't fully believe in. They nod along to ideas they can't quite explain, because everyone else is nodding too. Have you ever felt that pressure? The pressure to keep your head down, to not ask questions, to stay polite in the face of something obviously wrong, because speaking up would make you look difficult? This is where the danger lies, because once morality is outsourced to group consensus, it becomes weaponized. Now, being good means staying quiet when someone's being humiliated. Being good means reposting what you're told, without ever checking if it's true. Being good means feeling more righteous than the person you just canceled. And the more certain you are of your goodness, the less you question your actions. That's when you become dangerous. Not in a way that burns down cities, but in a way that slowly erodes truth. In a way that makes silence normal, that makes fear look like compassion. This is the great paradox Orwell exposes. The more obsessed we become with appearing good, the more easily we participate in evil. Because real morality isn't about appearing, it's about seeing. And to see clearly in a world full of lies, you have to risk being seen as wrong. Are you willing to take that risk? To be labeled offensive, rude, intense, aggressive, just because you dared to notice something that others ignored? Or have you been trained, like the people in Orwell's nightmare, to smile through the pain, to call it kindness, and to betray yourself in the name of harmony? The ones who commit the greatest violence often believe they're keeping the peace. So ask yourself, what have you stayed silent about, just to look like a good person? Orwell would say, that's where the real danger begins. Let's go deeper. You've felt it, haven't you? That moment when the room goes quiet, not because you said something cruel, but because you said something true. And the truth wasn't nice enough. Today we no longer burn books in the public square. We don't need to. The fire burns silently behind smiles, behind HR-approved slogans, behind every performance of kindness that's more about conformity than care. This is the new tyranny, not boots and batons, but cheerful slogans and sanitized conversations. A world where the only moral currency is niceness. And here's the terrifying part. George Orwell saw it coming. He wrote, "The choice for mankind lies between freedom and happiness, and for the great bulk of mankind, happiness is better." What he meant wasn't the joy of liberation. He meant the happiness of compliance, the contentment of a domesticated population. The modern world has confused politeness with virtue. We've traded spine for smiles. And in the name of being good people, we've created a culture where it's more dangerous to speak the truth than to lie with a gentle tone. This is what Orwell warned about, not just authoritarian regimes that punish your body, but moral systems that punish your soul. Because what if the fear of being disliked is the true leash around your throat? We are now raised, educated, and rewarded to be agreeable. We learn to keep our voice soft, our words vague, our convictions negotiable. We apologize before we speak. We pad every sentence in cotton. And when someone dares to be direct, to say something that cuts through the noise, we don't thank them. We flinch. We shame them. We call them aggressive, arrogant, inappropriate. We don't ask, is it true? We ask, was it polite? You've likely seen this in your own life. Maybe in a classroom where the student who questions the groupthink is silenced with eye rolls and awkward glances. Maybe in a company meeting where someone calls out a lie and everyone pretends they didn't hear it. It's not just social pressure, it's a moral expectation that good people must never make anyone uncomfortable. But here's the contradiction. Truth is always uncomfortable. Growth is uncomfortable. Honesty is uncomfortable. Love, real love, the kind that demands integrity, is deeply uncomfortable. So the question becomes, what kind of world are we building if we value comfort more than truth? Here's where it gets darker. Once you turn niceness into a moral standard, truth becomes immoral. Confrontation becomes sinful. Refusal to comply becomes an act of violence. And soon, silence becomes virtue. This is what Orwell meant when he wrote, "If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. But in our world, telling someone what they don't want to hear is now labeled as hostility. Disagreement is called toxicity. Conviction is called extremism. You're not allowed to say, "This is wrong." You're only allowed to say, "Well, I understand where you're coming from." You're not allowed to say, "I don't believe in this." Only. That's an interesting perspective. We're stuck in a prison of emotional inoffensiveness, where even the mildest challenge is seen as cruelty. And the more sensitive the world becomes, the more powerful the appearance of kindness becomes, even when it hides the deepest cowardice. Let's take it further. Niceness, when weaponized, becomes the perfect shield for cruelty. Because a nice person can betray you without ever raising their voice. A kind institution can destroy lives while issuing PR statements about empathy. A well-meaning friend can undermine you with passive silence, or worse, silence disguised as neutrality. In Orwell's imagined world of newspeak, language is distorted to erase dangerous thought. Today we've done something similar, not with force, but with social scripts. We've rewritten our moral code so thoroughly that now, telling the truth without the right tone makes you a villain. And this is no accident. In a world where truth can topple illusions, where dissent can unravel carefully controlled narratives, the most effective weapon is not censorship. It's social punishment. It's the raised eyebrow, the uncomfortable silence, the subtle exclusion. You're not banned, you're just not invited. This is how goodness becomes a trap, not because others expect it, but because you've started expecting it from yourself. And here's the painful paradox. The more you try to be good in the way the world demands, the more you erase yourself. Your honesty, your passion, your edge, your soul. You walk on eggshells not just around others, but inside your own mind. You edit your thoughts before they can become feelings. You smile when you feel rage. You nod when you mean no. And you convince yourself this is maturity. This is being a good person. But really, it's the slow death of your integrity. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." Why? Because accepting yourself means facing your anger, your fear, your judgment, your truth. It means stepping out of the performance. And no one claps when the play ends, especially not when the play is called being a good person. So if you feel exhausted by the act of constant kindness, if you feel like your truth is suffocating under the weight of your own smile, you're not broken, you're waking up. Because true morality doesn't look like politeness. It doesn't sound like pleasantries. It looks like courage. It sounds like defiance. It feels like friction, the sacred friction between what is and what should be. So the next time you're told to be nice, ask yourself, who benefits from your silence? Who profits from your discomfort? Who gains when you keep your truth quiet? Because sometimes the kindest thing you can do is to speak the words everyone's been too afraid to say, even if they call you unkind for saying them. It used to be that control meant force, guns, prisons, secret police. But Orwell understood something far more chilling. The most powerful form of control is the one that feels like your own idea. The tyrant of today doesn't bark orders. He whispers encouragement. He doesn't say, obey. He says, be better. You're not punished for disobedience. You're punished for not improving fast enough, not being empathetic enough, not having the right thoughts. We used to fear Big Brother watching us. Now we've become Big Brother watching ourselves. We censor our opinions before they leave our mouths. We question every intuition before it forms a sentence. We self-correct, self-flagellate, self-police, and we call it progress. This is what Orwell prophesied in 1984 with terrifying clarity. The most effective way to destroy people is to deny and obliterate their own understanding of their history. In the modern world, that destruction doesn't come from book burnings or torture chambers. It comes from moral confusion, where yesterday's wisdom is suddenly deemed hate speech, where centuries of insight are dismissed as problematic, where your own instincts are suspect unless they've been validated by the right crowd. You're no longer allowed to trust your gut. You must trust the narrative. You must defer to the latest update in acceptable morality. And if you don't, you're not just wrong, you're dangerous. Because in a world of moral performance, thinking for yourself is the ultimate threat. And that's how control hides, not in the banning of ideas, but in making you too afraid to think them. Look at how language has shifted. Words like problematic, toxic, unsafe, they don't describe physical danger anymore. They describe psychological discomfort, and not your own discomfort, but the possibility that someone else might be uncomfortable. This isn't about protecting people, it's about controlling people. It's not about empathy, it's about conformity dressed in empathy's clothing. Because when everything can be labeled as harm, then anything can be punished. Your tone, your silence, your hesitation, even your curiosity, especially your curiosity. The new thought police don't break into your home. They knock politely, smile, and ask, "Are you sure you want to say that?" And the scariest part? They live inside your head. You wake up wondering, did I say too much? Did I offend someone? Am I problematic? Should I apologize? This isn't compassion, it's gaslighting on a cultural scale. In Orwell's world, truth became a moving target. 2 + 2 = 5. If the party says it, it must be true. Today we see the same thing, not from a single authority, but from the hive mind, from trending topics, from weaponized virtue, from the ever-shifting sands of what's acceptable. 1 month, a statement is applauded. The next, it's condemned. 1 year, a belief is common sense. The next, it's hate speech. And so you learn not to trust anything, not your memory, not your intuition, not your own words. You hesitate, you delay, you say less, you become smaller. You learn to disappear from yourself, just enough to survive. But you are not made to live in fear of your own voice. There's a moment in 1984 when Winston, the main character, is finally broken. Not by beatings or starvation, but by a single demand. Say 2 + 2 = 5. And when he finally says it, not because he believes it, but because he's too broken to resist, that's when they know they've won. That's what the new thought police want. Not your silence, not your compliance, your internal surrender. They want you to doubt yourself so deeply that you lose all sense of center and call it growth, call it maturity, call it being good. But deep down, you feel it. You feel the erosion of something sacred, not just your opinions, but your ability to believe in anything at all. Because the final war isn't for your words, it's for your soul's permission to mean them. Let's go even deeper. In a world ruled by moral fluidity, sincerity becomes dangerous. To feel strongly is to risk being rigid. To take a stand is to risk being extreme. To speak truthfully is to risk being divisive. So what happens? We all become actors, carefully curating our performances, smiling when we're unsure, agreeing when we're unconvinced, nodding when our inner voice is screaming no. But when the play is over, you lie awake at night, rehearsing scenes that already passed, wondering who you disappointed, what you could have said differently, whether you were a good person. This is the new psychological warfare, a war that turns the battlefield inward, a war that doesn't force you into submission, but convinces you to surrender your truth voluntarily. And once that happens, they don't need to censor you. You'll do it yourself. There's a dangerous illusion baked into modern morality, the belief that goodness is neutral, that being nice, polite, and agreeable means you're safe from doing harm. But Orwell knew something terrifying. He saw that goodness, if it is blind, can become the most powerful weapon of evil. How? Because systems of power don't need your brutality. They need your silence. They need your obedience. And more than anything, they need you to believe you're one of the good ones. Orwell wrote, "The greatest mistake is to imagine that the human being is an individual. That's where it all starts. Because if you believe you're separate from the crowd, that your thoughts are your own, then you'll never notice how your goodness is being used. You'll nod along with orders. You'll forward the email. You'll use the right words. You'll stay quiet at the wrong time, not out of malice, but out of virtue. You'll become the moral fuel for a machine that's far from moral." Orwell saw this clearly during his time fighting in the Spanish Civil War. He witnessed decent men, full of conviction, fall under the spell of propaganda and fight for causes that betrayed their values. It wasn't evil people pulling the strings. It was average people, convinced they were doing the right thing, because they wanted to be good. Not wise, not free, just good. And in a society where being good is defined by conformity, this becomes a tool of control. The good citizen becomes the most useful subject, the one who polices others, the one who never questions, the the one who turns away when someone else suffers, because it's not their role, because they followed the rules. This is how good people let atrocities happen. They didn't build the machine, they just didn't stop it. And that, Orwell warns, is how evil survives. Because the truly dangerous man isn't the one with a gun. It's the one who does nothing while the gun is pointed. And even more dangerous than that is the one who helps reload, thinking he's handing over water. The man who supports the system because he believes he's on the side of truth. This is the terrifying genius of modern control. It doesn't need you to be evil. It just needs you to be good, by their definition. Polite, agreeable, silent, loyal, afraid of conflict, afraid of offense, afraid of being seen as wrong, afraid to question the very thing that is killing your freedom. And so the world is filled with good people, standing in neat lines, bowing to invisible masters, never noticing the chains. Because the prison is decorated in moral language, because the bars look like virtue, because the rules say, this is what a good person does. And that, Orwell whispers, is the most effective kind of evil. The kind that wears your face, the kind that speaks in your voice, the kind that makes you feel proud while it steals your soul. But there's a way out of this trap, a truth so dangerous the system hopes you never remember it. In the final part, we'll reveal Orwell's forgotten warning about rebellion and why your silence might already be betrayal. At some point, the question is no longer, are you a good person? The real question becomes, good for what? The world is full of people who want to be good, but Orwell's final warning was this: in a system that rewards obedience, being good often means being complicit. And in a system that profits off your silence, silence is betrayal. You can only stay quiet for so long before it becomes a choice. And this is where things get uncomfortable. Because if you're watching this, there's a part of you that already knows. You've held back your truth. You've swallowed your voice. You've played along just to avoid being seen as difficult, different, or wrong. You didn't want to upset anyone. You didn't want to be cast out. You didn't want to lose comfort, approval, safety. So you smiled, nodded, obeyed, but deep down, something felt off. This isn't what freedom is supposed to feel like. This isn't what truth is supposed to sound like. This isn't what you were supposed to become. And Orwell would tell you, that discomfort, that quiet ache, that's your soul resisting assimilation, because your silence isn't neutral. It shapes the world just as much as your voice does. Every time you say nothing when you see a lie, the lie grows stronger. Every time you avoid conflict in the name of being good, injustice gets more comfortable. Every time you nod along with something you don't believe, the part of you that knows starts to die. Orwell didn't just write about totalitarian regimes, he wrote about you. He wrote about your quiet choices, your quiet compromises, your quiet retreat from truth, disguised as politeness, and he knew the cost. Because once you become too afraid to speak, you've already surrendered the battle. Not to violence, not to politics, but to cowardice. He once said, during times of universal deceit, telling the truth becomes a revolutionary act. Not thinking the truth, not agreeing with the truth in your head, but speaking it, living it, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it costs you friends, jobs, applause. Because if you don't, the machine wins. And here's the most painful truth Orwell reveals. The system doesn't need to kill you. It just needs to convince you to kill your courage, to trade your fire for comfort, to trade your wisdom for applause, to trade your soul for the illusion of virtue. And that's what makes this war so violent. Not because there are bombs in the streets, but because there's silence in your heart. The battle was never outside. The real war is the one you fight every day, between your need to be accepted and your need to be free, between who the world tells you to be and who you are meant to become. So let's ask the question one final time. Are you good or just obedient? Are you moral or just afraid? Are you free or just well-behaved? Because in the end, history won't remember your smile. It won't remember how polite you were. It won't care how agreeable you sounded in the crowd. History only remembers this: who had the courage to speak when it was dangerous, who told the truth when everyone else lied, who loved their soul more than their image, who was not good, but real. If this video stirred something in you, if it echoed a truth you've buried deep, then don't walk away unchanged. Like this video and comment with the moment that hit hardest. And if you want to keep growing, subscribe to our channel to join a community of seekers, thinkers, and rebels, people who choose truth over comfort and meaning over applause. Until next time, keep shining, not to be seen, but to see.